Imagine waking up in the middle of the night to the sound of horses. You are 8 years old. You live in a small village in the Balkans, and the men outside your door have come to take you. Not to kill you, but to turn you into something your parents will never recognize. You will never see your family again, and in 20 years, you will be the most feared soldier in the world. This is the story of the Janissaries. The Ottoman Empire had a system unlike anything in the medieval world. Every few years, Ottoman officials would ride through the Christian villages of the Balkans, Serbia, Bulgaria, Greece, Bosnia, Albania, and select the strongest, most intelligent boys between the ages of 8 and 18. They were taken from their families by law. Resistance meant death. The Ottomans called it the Devshirme, the collecting. The Christians called it the blood tax. These boys were not slaves. They were something more terrifying than slaves. They were being remade, stripped of their names, their language, their religion, their families, and rebuilt into the perfect soldiers of the Sultan. Most of them would never go home. Some of them would become grand viziers, generals, governors, the most powerful men in the empire. All of them began the same way, taken in the night, gone by morning. The Ottoman officials who came to take the boys were not looking for just any child. They had a list of requirements. The boy had to be healthy, strong, and intelligent. He had to be handsome. The Ottomans believed appearance reflected character. He had to be between 8 and 18, and critically, he had to be Christian. Muslim children were exempt. The empire wanted boys it could completely remake. The selection process was methodical and brutal. Village priests were required by law to bring all eligible boys before the Ottoman officials. Boys who were hidden faced severe punishment for their families. Boys who were sick or disabled were left behind, not out of mercy, but because they were not useful. The officials would examine each boy physically, checking teeth, eyes, hands, posture. They asked questions through interpreters. They watched how the boys moved, how they responded to pressure. The strongest and most promising were selected. The rest were left behind. Selected boys were immediately separated from their families. There was no ceremony, no time for long goodbyes. Ottoman records describe mothers throwing themselves in front of horses, fathers being restrained by soldiers, children screaming as they were led away. The officials had seen it before. They kept moving. The first thing they took was his name. The second thing they took was his God. The third thing they took was his language. By the time the Ottoman system was finished with him, the boy from the Balkan village was gone. In his place stood something the empire had designed from the beginning, a weapon that felt nothing but loyalty to the Sultan. The newly collected boys were sent first to Turkish families in Anatolia. This was deliberate. They were placed with ordinary Turkish households, not in barracks, not in palaces, specifically to learn the language, customs, and religion of their new world. They worked as farm laborers. They learned to pray 5 times a day. They learned to speak Ottoman Turkish until their Slavic or Greek accent disappeared completely. This phase lasted several years. By the end of it, most boys had forgotten how to speak their mother tongue fluently. Many had converted to Islam, not by force, but by immersion, surrounded by it every day with no alternative. Then the real training began. They were brought to Istanbul and sorted by ability. The most intelligent went to the palace schools, potential future administrators and generals. The strongest went to the Janissary training corps. Both paths led to the same place: absolute loyalty, absolute service, a life that belonged entirely to the Sultan. The Janissary training was unlike anything in the medieval world. Other armies trained soldiers. The Ottomans engineered them. From the moment a boy entered the Janissary Corps, every aspect of his life was controlled. What he ate, when he slept, who he spoke to, what he believed. The goal was not just to make him deadly. The goal was to make him incapable of imagining any other life. Janissary recruits trained for years before they ever saw battle. They trained in archery, swordsmanship, wrestling, and later, firearms. The Janissaries were among the first armies in the world to adopt gunpowder weapons as their primary armament, decades before European armies made the same transition. But the physical training was secondary to the psychological conditioning. Janissaries were forbidden from marrying during their active service. They were forbidden from engaging in trade. They lived in barracks together, ate together, trained together. Their entire social world was the core. The Ottoman system understood something that modern militaries still apply. The most effective soldiers are not those who fight for a country or a king, but those who fight for each other. They were paid well. They were fed better than most civilians. They had status, respect, and power, and they were completely, totally owned by the Sultan. European commanders who faced the Janissaries in battle described something that terrified them more than the Ottoman numbers or the Ottoman cannons. It was the silence. Most medieval armies went into battle screaming. It was how you maintained courage in the face of death. The Janissaries advanced in complete silence, disciplined, certain, as if what they were doing was not war but work. By the 15th century, the Janissaries were the most feared military force in the world. They had fought at Constantinople. It was Janissaries who found the weak point in the wall and broke through in the final assault. They had fought in Hungary, in Persia, in Egypt, in North Africa. Wherever the Ottoman Empire expanded, the Janissaries were the tip of the spear. European armies of the same period were largely feudal, knights who owed military service, peasant levies with minimal training, mercenaries who fought for whoever paid them. The Janissaries were professional soldiers in an era when professional armies barely existed. They were also fiercely loyal to each other in ways that transcended the Sultan himself. When a Janissary officer was killed in battle, his men did not retreat. They fought harder, not for the empire, for him. The boys taken from Balkan villages had become something their parents could not have imagined, and something their parents would not have recognized. Here is the question that historians still argue about. The boys taken by the Devshirme, did they suffer or did they succeed? Because the records show both. Some Janissaries rose to become the most powerful men in the Ottoman Empire, grand viziers who ran the entire state, generals who conquered continents. Many lived better lives than they ever would have in the Balkan villages they came from, and some of them never forgot where they came from at all. There are Ottoman records of Janissaries who, decades later, returned to their home villages, not to reconnect with their families. Their families were often dead or scattered, but to see the place, to stand in front of the house they had been taken from as children. Some brought money. Some built churches in their home regions, secretly, in violation of their Muslim identity, paying for the construction of Christian buildings in the villages where they had been born. Others never looked back. They had become Ottoman completely. Their Christian origin was a fact of birth, not of identity. The Devshirme created men who existed between two worlds and fully belonged to neither. They were not the Christians they had been born as, and they were not quite the same as men who had been born Muslim. They were something the Ottoman Empire had invented, something that had never existed before. The system that made the Janissaries powerful eventually made them dangerous. By the 16th century, the Janissaries had become so powerful that they were no longer just the Sultan's weapon. They were a political force that could make and unmake sultans. And when the Ottoman Empire finally tried to replace them with a modern army, the Janissaries did something that would have been unthinkable to the boys taken from Balkan villages centuries earlier. They rebelled against the Sultan himself. The transformation took centuries. As the Devshirme system weakened, Janissaries began to marry, to have children, to engage in trade. The absolute separation from civilian life that had made them deadly slowly eroded. By the 17th and 18th centuries, Janissary positions were being inherited by sons. The corps was becoming a hereditary guild rather than an elite military force. They revolted multiple times. They deposed sultans. They controlled appointments. They became the thing that every institution eventually risks becoming, more interested in preserving itself than in fulfilling its purpose. In 1826, Sultan Mahmud II had enough. He announced the dissolution of the Janissary Corps and the creation of a modern European-style army. The Janissaries revolted immediately. Mahmud turned his artillery on their barracks. The Janissary Corps, 4 centuries of history, tens of thousands of men, was destroyed in a single day. The Ottomans called it the Auspicious Incident. The last Janissaries died in 1826, their barracks burning around them, killed by the empire they had served for 400 years. And with them died something that had no name, the strange, impossible identity of men who had been taken as Christian children and remade into Muslim warriors, who had conquered the world for a sultan, and who had, in the end, become too powerful to be controlled by anyone, not even themselves. The Devshirme system ran for approximately 400 years. Historians estimate that hundreds of thousands of boys were taken from Christian families across the Balkans during that time. Their descendants are everywhere, in Turkey, in the Balkans, in the Middle East. Most don't know it. The Janissaries left a mark on every country they touched. The word itself entered European languages as a synonym for an elite soldier, a loyal enforcer, someone who does the powerful's work without question. But the real legacy of the Janissaries is more complicated than that. They were stolen children who became conquerors. They were Christians who became the sword of Islam. They were slaves who became kings. They were instruments of an empire that used them completely, and in the end, could not survive without them. The boy taken from a Balkan village in the night never went home, but he changed the world.